A lot of Bulls fans are recently asking themselves, are we seeing Modest Buzelis actually take a step forward? Or is this just a byproduct of the team just not being that good? And how much of this is going to be is Modest able to keep up heading into next year? I'm going to say Modest is in rare territory. He met some Jordan rare territory, but we're going to kind of break it down, bring him more grounded and back down to earth. We're talking about Leonard Miller and how he is forcing his way into the Bulls rotation, rightfully so. And the mock drafts have the Chicago Bulls drafting somebody that's a very familiar archetype for the Bulls. Is that the right move, though? We're going to talk about all that and more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content today, y'all. So, after the trade deadline, the door has swung open for Modest Buzelis in a major way. It swung open for him to step into a much larger role, scoring-wise, and in the priority of the offense than what we've seen from Modest Buzelis. And for what it's worth, he's responded pretty well. Now, he had the 43-point explosion, or 41-point explosion, of course, which was great to see. But on top of that, you still, like, it's about the consistency, right? The highs are great. And you know, we need to take some time to acknowledge the highs, of course, but it's about the baseline. It's about, like, has Modest's baseline improved from year one to year two? And I've talked about it. Yes, it has improved. Now, what's the path that you see Modest Buzelis on? I had a couple of episodes ago where I compared him to some other forward players. I compared him in the first 2 years to Franz Wagner and Jalen Johnson, because those are two guys that I think when you look at Modest's skill set, it's similar to those players. Now, he doesn't do as much facilitating as Jalen Johnson, that's for sure. He doesn't take as many shots as Franz Wagner right now either, but that's a trajectory that you kind of want Modest Buzelis on. And his first two seasons is very comparable to Franz Wagner. And as far as Jalen Johnson, he blows Jalen Johnson's first two seasons out of the water. But Jalen wasn't on the court a lot in his first two seasons. And, you know, that's something to be said about that as well, that Modest can be on the court and has been a starter since, you know, about halfway through his rookie year. But Modest is taking the strides. And that's really what you want to see from Modest Buzelis, you know, the rest of the way here. It's about taking strides. You know, coming into the season, there were a lot of people that had things like, okay, Modest be an all-star. He's going to average 18 or 20 points, right? And I took a more level-headed approach by it. I looked at the roster. I realized, hey, Modest is still going to be the third, fourth option, scoring-wise maybe, which is not going to open up a lot of opportunities for him. So there's that one. Now, Buzelis, that, like I said at the beginning of this, that's been removed now since the trade deadline. Modest Buzelis is going to be at least probably the second scoring option while Anthony Simons is out, right? And so he dropped a career-high 41 points. Of course, in overtime, we all know that it's all been talked about, and that's all great to see. He was efficient from the field. You know, at some times, you know, the three-point line was where he wasn't efficient at. But the question becomes about this is, what is Modest Buzelis' potential? Does Modest Buzelis still have does he have star-level potential? And depending on who you talk to and who you ask, you'll get different answers on it. I'll say this. The potential, yeah, it's there. The potential is there because Modest is still very raw. And I think sometimes we forget how raw Modest really is, right? But when you look at him, the Chicago Bulls have only seen three players drop 40-plus points, being 21 or younger. And we already know who those guys are, right? And no, one of them is not Derrick Rose. But that's more so because Derrick Rose came to a team that was actually winning his rookie year, but had, you know, Ben Gordon on it. But Michael Jordan, Elton Brand, and Modest Buzelis. That's it. Now, we know who MJ is. He's the GOAT. It is what it is there, right? Elton Brand had a really solid NBA career. Not a great NBA career, but he was a multi-time All-Star for what it's worth. And, you know, there you go. He's the number one overall pick. Modest Buzelis being the 11th overall pick is in rare air for it. And, you know, it doesn't happen very often. The floor for Modest Buzelis is a starter in the NBA. The ceiling for Modest Buzelis is still star-level potential there. It doesn't mean that he's going to hit it, but it is still star-level potential. And that's the question that the Bulls have to ask themselves, right? And that's what they have to see, and still seeing Modest Buzelis work out and train and be in the Advocate Center and all that type of stuff this summer, is that they're going to have to continue looking at it and asking themselves, can Modest actually turn into a star? And that's the question that a lot of Bulls fans are asking when it comes down to it. I said I was going to try to keep this grounded, and I am, right? You guys know, I love Modest Buzelis. I think Modest is great. I love what Modest is, the potential. I love the mentality that Modest Buzelis has. All those things are legitimate for Modest. And when you look at it, it's 15 and a half, well, almost 16 points per game. He's averaging in his second year. This is his first full year starter. He started 31 games out of playing 80 games last season. He started all 64 games he's played so far this season. That's what Modest has done. It's been, again, legitimate. There's just no doubt about it. His shooting percentages have gone up. His shooting from the field has gone up almost 3%. His shooting from three-point range has gone up slightly, but the volume has doubled, which is the important part there. His three-point percentage last year was 36.1%. He's 36.5% this year, but he's gone up from 3.3 threes per game to 6 threes per game. So the fact that the volume almost doubled and the percentage stayed the same, that's major. And what you want to look at for a prospect, and I think especially for a player, if you're talking about, are you asking the question, do they have a star level ceiling? You have to ask yourself this: how much of their pre-draft flaws have they corrected or turned into strengths? That's the way that I choose to look at it, and because it's a key factor, right? When you look at Anthony Edwards, for example, one of the problems with Anthony Edwards was he wasn't a good shooter and he wasn't solid defensively. He stepped up in both those areas quite considerably over his time in the NBA. Modest Buzelis came into the draft process as the potential of a modern point forward, but couldn't shoot, right? Now, there was some thought, if he goes back to his high school shot, they tweaked the shot a little bit. He was a decent shooter in college. And my pre-draft thing for Modest was, all right, how good can he be if that shot never develops? Now, we don't have to worry about that. The shot has developed for Modest, and he's gotten back to being at least a three-point shooter that you just can't leave open. Now, there are times where I want him to be a little bit more selective about his three-point shots and not jack them up as much, but that is what it is. I think that, when you look at that, the attempts can go down, but he can maybe get more efficient if he gets more choosy with his three-point shots. But the thing with Modest is that we haven't even seen things consistently from him at the NBA level that were strengths of his before. His passing. We don't use Modest Buzelis passing a lot. We just don't. Now, that's because we've had guards like Trey Jones, Kobe White, Zach LaVine here at the beginning of it, and of course Josh Giddey for the entirety of his career. But when you look at it, like, Modest's turnovers have gone up this year to 2 turnovers per game. That's part of just how sloppy the Bulls have played. He's averaging 2.1 assists and 2 turnovers. So if Modest can get back to that part of his game and tighten up the dribble, he's already shown you that he can be a decent three-point shooter. And I think if he gets, like I said, a little bit more choosy with his three-point shots, we're probably looking at Modest at, on maybe 4.5, 5 three-point shots, probably become more close to a 38% three-point shooter, which is a really good mark at being that as a forward. But, that's something to come. I want him to refine that, get better at that. If he can get the passing together, lower the turnovers, and tighten up that dribble to where he can take more players off the dribble in isolation. Right now, what we're seeing from Modest Buzelis is that because he's so wiry and he does have a little bit of strength with that speed and the leaping ability, when he's moving off the ball, he's dangerous. Now, imagine if Modest Buzelis tightens up that dribble, gets that more of an actual weapon in his game, and then you have somebody that can also take players off the dribble, which we have seen glimpses of, right? It's just he needs to improve that dribble, tighten it up just a little bit to get it to the place where he needs to get it to. Then, yeah, Modest, the trajectory to become a star is pretty evident. The athleticism out the wazoo, shot blocker, he's become one of the best on-ball defenders in isolation in the NBA, which is crazy that he's given up less than 30% on isolation times, which means players aren't going to want to isolate against Modest. Now, pick and roll becomes a thing for him because he gets caught up in picks because of the strength and stuff like that, but we're seeing Modest grow as a defender. So with these things, if he continues this trajectory, Modest is the type of player that, to me, you don't expect him to rest on his laurels. He doesn't seem like a player that's going to get to the point of he gets in, he's like, all right, cool, I'm good. I don't have to keep working on something. Modest seems like a guy that's going to continue working. If he tightens up that dribble, gets a little bit more efficient from the three-point line, and limits the turnovers and can actually be used as a point forward in some lineups, Modest's trajectory to being a star is right there. We just got to see him continue to grow and develop. It's year 2. He's 21 years old. I've told you guys, typically you want to look at the age 23 to 24 season when a player makes that true leap. If they're going to become a star, we'll see it. Jalen Johnson, for example, a player that I think is similar to Modest, is didn't really make that true leap until year 4. And so, that is something that you can see from potentially Modest Buzelis. We'll see. We're in year 2 of Modest, but Modest has shown a lot, and I love the player that Modest Buzelis has become. And like I said, it just really sometimes bothers me when people like to talk about what he is not, like he's been in the league, like he's Patrick Williams and he's been in the league 5 years. We know what he's not, and he's working on that, and he's already put himself in a position to work on a lot of his flaws, and that is something that you have to give credit for, and that's something that is also admirable for a player that your team is investing in. So that's just how I wanted to start off the show, but I want to get into the mocks now. ESPN came out with their latest mock draft. Jeremy Woo, who came out with that, and he has the Chicago Bulls selecting Nate Ament. Now, a lot of you guys have brought that up, right? He has him selecting the Bulls selecting him at number 9 pick. Now, the thing about this is he's not a guard. He's one of the few players that's a non-guard projected to go in that area that the Bulls draft pick is if they don't get lottery luck, right? And Nate Ament out of Tennessee is a guy that theoretically, shapes up to be that interchangeable forward next to Modest Buzelis. You talk about positional basketball. Both those guys can play the 3 or the 4, those type of things. When you look at that, and that's not a bad move. It's not a bad move. Now, there are some other mocks are going to change a lot right now, especially during the tournament. But when you look at some have Ament going as high as number 6 or 7, right? And so that depends on if he's going to fall there for the Chicago Bulls. But again, that's going to be more determined by the draft order once that's determined, right? But you look at this guy who was a top 4 recruit in his class. He's averaged 17.4 points, 6.4 rebounds in 29 games this season. And also, he's doing it on a winning team. They're 25-9 are the Volunteers so far, at top 25 in this. And so when you look at this is not the first time that Nate Ament has come up for the Chicago Bulls. I think that there was a Bleacher Report had him going earlier, being the 13th overall selection, like earlier in the season by then, but he's moved up, and he's moved up because of his play and how he's grown as a player over the course of this season. Also, 6.4 rebounds per game. He's shooting the ball only 32% from 3, but this is a guy that is very similar to the type of players that the Bulls have drafted before. And that's part of the thing here, right? It's clear that AK has a type in the draft. We just drafted Noah Essengay as well, so would we go Nate Ament? And I think a lot of people who are talking about more kind of power forward or small forward players are forgetting that Noah Essengay is there. But then again, as I've said before, you got to go with the best player available. Will Nate Ament be the best player available when the Chicago Bulls pick? That's the question that you have to ask for here. He's averaging a steal per game, a half a block per game, right? So, yes, there's that interchangeability. You have kind of that Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, like kind of that type of mode. If you're looking at pairing Nate Ament with this Bulls team being, and with Modest Buzelis is kind of what you're looking at there, then I don't hate it, right? You want kind of redundancy. You want those interchangeable things. Positionless basketball is a thing. We've even seen Modest play some 2 here recently, right? So there's that part of it. But Nate Ament is one of those guys that when the calendar flipped to 2026, that's when he really started to look more as the talented player that he looks like now. And he is a scorer, right? He's been averaging 20 points on 38% shooting from the field over the last 14 games. So when you look at the fact that he hasn't been a great 3-point shooter, he's starting to show maybe signs of being able to turn that around. And that is important in the NBA, regardless of which forward position that you're going to play. It's important with that one. So the idea of pairing Modest Buzelis with Nate Ament, it makes sense, right? Now, does it make more sense to know Essengay and Modest Buzelis? I don't know. Right now, I personally do think that too, way down the road, we're talking about 5-6 years when he puts on the grown man weight, I do think Noah Essengay is eventually going to play some 5. And it won't even be small ball 5, not with his wingspan and the fact that it looks like he may be 6'10", almost 6'11" now. So there you go on that one. But I do think that Nate Ament may be more of a streamlined pick. Now, have all of them and figure it out. And that's the thing when it comes down to it, right? The thing that you also want to look at for as well is that what does Nate Ament bring that Modest may not be? And I think that is that Nate Ament seems to be a little, and I don't say this as a knock, but seems to be a little bit tougher and stronger than it. Now, they have very similar frames, but it just seems like Nate Ament may be a little bit stronger there than where he was, and he gets to the free throw line almost 7 times per game. That shows the aggression that he plays with. I wouldn't hate Nate Ament here with Chicago, right? I just have some questions about other things that are going. He can handle the ball. He can play either forward position. Is that 3-point shooting that he came on with now, is it going to be legit in the NBA? That's the thing that you have to get there. But you look at Modest Buzelis and how he solved his problems, right? So if you draft Nate Ament and he's the best player available on the board, I'm not mad at it, right? Now, I know there are some Bulls fans that think you got to take a center by any means necessary in this draft, and there are some that are starting to move up in that as well, right? Like Hans Steinbeck is a guy that right now is projected to go between like 10 and 12 or 13 by a lot of mocks. I would not be surprised if by the draft combine, he's predicted to be more of a top 10 pick. And then you have to review that, right? Then the Bulls are going to have to look at all these prospects, bring them in for workouts. I want to see the Bulls do a Ryan Poles as far as work everybody out. Work so many players out that you have so much information because you just never know how this draft is going to go. You don't know who's going to trade in, who's going to trade up, who's going to trade down, who's going to trade out of the draft to go after a star. A lot of those options are there, and the Bulls don't want to be caught with their pants down where they focus so much on one prospect that by the time their draft selection comes on the board, they're not prepared for it. So, Nate Ament would be a perfectly good player. Him and Keaton Wagler have both been moving up recently. That makes sense when you look at the way that they've been playing. No questions about that. They may not be on the board when the Chicago Bulls draft, but there's still the best players that are slated to be available around that time are still mainly guards. So you got to see how that's going to work out for it. But let me know what you guys think on that. ESPN predicting, or right now mocking, not necessarily prediction, mocking the Chicago Bulls to draft Nate Ament at number 9, which the Bulls, they gotta keep their stuff going because those odds, man. Milwaukee is trying to sneak up on the Bulls. They're only a half game back. The one loss and one Bulls win, the Milwaukee Bucks take over the 9th seed and the Bulls take over the 10th seed. So, we talked about that a little bit, but we'll do a full tank watch on Monday. I'll go into detail on where the tank is and everything is with that one, but let me know that. And we're gearing up. We're about to start doing our draft. I said by the end of March is when I'm going to start doing my heavy draft coverage. So we're going to start focusing more and more on the draft here soon, especially with the NCAA tournament going on. It's a perfect time to start covering that. So we'll be going into that coverage a lot more here soon, right? But with that said, I do want to talk about this. And this is another topic that a lot of people have been talking about around the Chicago Bulls, and that is Leonard Miller. Leonard Miller. Listen, if Leonard Miller over these last 17 games has any form of something that you can call a breakout, it would be such a plus for the Chicago Bulls that really didn't get much back at the trade deadline. I mean, I want to be clear. Colin Sexton, if we keep him, he does look like a keeper, but he's an unrestricted free agent. We don't know. Jaden Ivey, it could end up being something solid, but right now he doesn't trust that leg, and it seems like the Bulls are going to shut him down for the year. Rob Dillingham, fuck no. Yabu and Nick Richards have been solid, but we know what they are at best. They're role players on winning teams, right? So that's what you're looking at. If Leonard Miller, somebody who was a second-round pick, the 33rd overall pick, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head, if he's a guy that continues to show that he can be in a rotation, that's a win for the Bulls. And much less if he shows that he's worth more than your $18 million player, Patrick Williams. Don't even get me started on that one. Leonard Miller continues to be somebody that when he plays, he's given time, he looks damn good, right? And he earns that time, right? And so I'm not here to say that Leonard Miller can turn into a star, even an NBA starter. I'm not saying that. But for somebody that was drafted as a second-round pick and was a throw-in in the trade, if he turns into anything for you that you can play consistently, that's more than you got out of Dalen. That's more than you got out of Julian. That's more than you got out of Marko Simonovic. That's more than you got out of these guys. If that ends up being the case, that's a win for the Chicago Bulls. Leonard Miller is 22 years old and still very raw. He's played 59 games in his NBA career in 3 years. So it's not like a lot's there. Now, the same question I throw to Rob Dillingham is the same question I throw to Leonard Miller, is that what weren't you doing in practice to where you couldn't earn a role? But then when you look at the forward rotation of the Minnesota Timberwolves, you can kind of see, all right, maybe where that was, right? But to me, I think this, and this is where a lot of people are at too. Leonard Miller should be playing over Patrick Williams. And even the fact that we are saying that about one of these trade deadline acquisitions, that's a toolsy forward that's 6'10", almost 6'11", and 22 years old, that is a win. Now, he's not showing it against the biggest competition. He's going to be on team scouting report a little bit more here soon if he keeps playing and see how he adjusts to that. But I tell you what, right now there's no downside to playing Leonard Miller more minutes. And it's sometimes the trades that they get, like, for example, Javonte Green was a throw-in the trade. People don't remember that, right? Look at the impact he had for the Bulls. Short, but look at the impact that he had, right? If AK does that again to where a throw-in the trade ends up being one of the best pieces that we get back, I'm not saying that it means that we all of a sudden need to trust all his moves, but it just goes to show you how unexpected value can be there. You just have to uncover it. And maybe Leonard Miller is that. It's sad that we can't say that about somebody who was a former top 10 pick in Rob Dillingham yet, but Leonard Miller is showing it on the basketball court. He's playing well. He's giving you effort on both sides of the ball. That is the type of player that you need to invest in. Hopefully the Bulls continue to do that, because if they do, they can come out on the other side of that with the gym. And that's getting a player in the second round that ends up turning into a consistent player for you. Again, I'm not saying starter. I'm not predicting any of that. I'm not even predicting that he's one of the first 8 guys in the rotation. But if you can get anything out of Leonard Miller to where he can be a consistent factor for you and help ease up and take some of that stress off, that's like getting a draft pick. That's what that is. So let's see. Leonard Miller is really good. And the question you also have to ask yourself, while we talk about players like Nate Ament, if you have no Essengame, you actually see something from Leonard Miller over these last 17 games, you even want to draft it for. That's a question that may have to be asked there, but we're not going to answer that here today. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, man. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell as well so you never miss an episode. But I want to hear from you guys in the comments. What do you think Modest's ceiling is? Do you think he has the potential to turn into a future star? And should Leonard Miller be in the rotation above Patrick Williams? And would you draft Nate Ament at number 9? Do you think he would be the best player on the board for the Chicago Bulls? As always, thank you guys for tuning in. You can follow us at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number 1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.